Welcome to the 61st episode of Patio Pondering Podcast. Today, I've got a guest from Iowa that I've known since 1998, Mr. Roy Bardole from outside Rippey, Iowa. Now, Rippey's kind of a funny name to those that don't live in Iowa.
Yeah.
Roy served as a mentor, helping me on the little farm we had in Iowa. He served as a spiritual leader, as our Sunday school teacher, and a lay leader in our church. And I've always admired his resilience and his commitment to stewardship. Usually, Roy, I start this part of the conversation saying, hey, give us a 30,000-foot view of your life. That would take the entire episode with your experience. So let's just jump in. When you look back at your upbringing, what do you think shaped your sense of resilience and stewardship?
Obviously, my dad. Dad was born in 1913. He came back to the farm. He attended Four Seas College in Des Moines. And in about 1936, Granddad wasn't able to put the crop in the spring. Dad would have graduated from Four Seas that spring. But since Granddad couldn't get the crop in, Dad come back to the farm to help put the crop in. And he never left. There's something about a farm that kind of grabs you. Granddad and great-granddad bought the original building site in 1901. There's always interesting stories about that, and I can go into them if you'd like, or I can skip over those. In starting during the Depression and the challenges of drought, it definitely focused Dad on how do you farm, keep it farming. He had neighbors. There's a gentleman by the name, or was a gentleman by the name of Tom Grow, that lived half a mile south, 3/4 of a mile south of the home building site. And Tom and Granddad Nate were best friends. And Tom had bought a farm in the early 30s, late 20s. And as the Depression lingered, why, Tom come terrible close to losing the farm. And what Dad remembers, or has told me of that, Tom forgot one thing. Tom had a wonderful, wonderful voice. He sang in the choir. Two of his boys and one of his daughters likewise had wonderful singing voices. And Tom's voice was huge. It was that big. And Tom got so low during that time that he could not sing in church. Dad never got past that. That is the shadow of the Depression that hung there for Dad. He was always very, very conservative, which you can say, oh, that's awful. He didn't progress when he should have. Yeah, but he didn't lose it either. We farm in the prairie, pothole region of Iowa. That's where the glaciers come down from the north. And by their movement, they left these shallow pockets in the landscape. Those pockets hold water today, if you don't drain them. And if you do drain them for a while, they hold water.
Yes, they do.
Yes, they do. What I call the home farm, about 25% of it drowns out in a heavy, heavy rain. 93 was the year that Des Moines lost their water. The Raccoon River flooded. We farm a stone's throw from the Coon. And that rain that took Des Moines' water fell on our farm. There was water flowing over saddles that I never saw flow over before nor since. Hope I don't see it again. The ground was full and we had terrible heavy rain. Back to Dad. When he came back to the farm, that first year, 36, was a terrible, terrible hot summer. They shocked their oats, ready for the thrashing machine. Granddad, all he did was carry Dad water while he shocked the oats. And Dad said you never sweat. Didn't appear to sweat. But there was always salt when you'd rub your arm, why there was salt run off your arm because it evaporated so quickly. Dad fully understood water, excess and lack of. He was very aware as time went on, the issue of labor. We always did it ourselves. Dad kept a herd of Black Angus cattle, and he built rotation around that had corn, soybeans, corn, oats, pasture, hay. So it's a 5-year rotation. We had one set of fields that were 50-acre fields. We had one set of fields that were 40-acre fields. He didn't always harvest all the hay on the 40-acre field. He always grazed the 50. If he did not think he had need for that, come late summer, he plowed that down as green manure. Well, that is a very strong technique. By having cattle, it leveled out his labor, so he didn't have to hire as much labor for harvest. He didn't have to hire labor putting the crop in. It was a very effective means of leveling his labor load out throughout the year. One of the really big lessons I learned when I was in high school, what we call the East 80, it was bought by Granddad during the Depression. When you look at the history of that 80, the names on it are very, very familiar to me of other people in different places in the community that had bought that or pieces of that and lost it. Granddad, being as frugal as he was able to actually buy land during the Depression. Anyway, that farm has some really, really heavy stuff for soil. And we were in, when I was about a junior in high school, we were in a wet spell, and Dad was wanting to get beans planted, but there was still corn stalks on. And he said, Roy, you go down and plow that 20 acres and we'll get beans on it. So I got on the tractor and went down. And that soil come off the moldboard of the plow in slabs. heavy. I don't care what you call it. It's gumbo, it's Webster, it's Harpster. The names have changed over the years, but it's the same stuff. A lot of clay in it, enough organic matter in it because of where it is that it makes your legs itch when you walk beans. So it's very close to an organic soil, but it just slabbed over. Well, in the spring, the following spring, I was in Voc Ag, and we were talking about soil structure and how you, so on and so forth, and how you can destroy soil structure by plowing it wet, because when the soil goes across the moldboard, you break the layers of the soil and you destroy the soil structure. So I took it on myself and I went down to the field and I stood with one foot that I'd plowed that past spring and stood with my other foot on alfalfa ground that had been an alfalfa that we had plowed. And I picked a handful out of each one. Took it into the schoolhouse. The Voc Ag instructor put paper towels out on the windowsill, and I put a handful of one, handful on the other. The instructor took water and poured on each one of those little piles of soil until they were a puddle, absolutely a puddle. Left them there overnight, and in the morning they had all dried. The soil that I had plowed wet and destroyed the structure occupied the same place that it did when he poured water on it. The soil that had been in alfalfa and plowed when it should have been plowed, when it dried up in crumbs. Be careful how you treat the soil. That is a lesson, probably the greatest lesson that I'd ever learned. Another lesson I'd learned happened to be on that same field. We had a tillage tool called a weeder, just had fingers instead of shovels. Mm-hmm. I don't know what other people called it. I've seen them pulled back in groves and dumped off, so they weren't used. Anyway, it was we put it behind the Ford tractor, and it would take 4 rows. And Dad said, we've got a patch out there in that field that really needs some attention. Why don't you take that out? At that time, we were still wire checking.
Oh, geez.
So you cultivate it one way and then cultivate it crossways. He says, you go out and you cultivate that. And he said, when you get all of it cultivated where we're having, I don't know what the weed was, don't remember, doesn't matter. But I cultivated it the one way, and I started to go in crossways on it. I said, I finally quit. And I went in, I said, Dad, I don't think I'm doing anything. I'm running the risk of damaging, destroying corn. All right. So probably 2 or 3 weeks later, Dad went out with the regular cultivator to cultivate. And he said, he come to the house, he said, Roy, I want you to come out with me, see what you did. So I went out with him. Well, where I crossed it, it was clean. Where I didn't cross it, there was lots of weeds yet. That was another lesson. Because we always struggled with ponds, sometime during the year, spring, early summer, whatever, we almost always had ponds. It seemed like every year we had to replant. So water in ponds was an issue on the farm that we farmed. The farm, these old farmers all had sayings. Dad's saying was, takes a long time to get dry, but not very long to get wet. Okay. My father-in-law, however, that's where I live in my wife's family's farm. That's where my house is now. His farm was relatively high. It's about a mile from my home place, but there's actually one little pond in the northwest corner that's amount to maybe a half, 3/4 of an acre. Another pond west of my house that George always had in a cattle lot. George's statement was, "Oh, I'd rather have a wet year than a dry year. In a wet year, you always get something, but you don't in a dry year." All right? You can't argue with either one. Depends on what your challenges have been while you've been farming the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Iowa Soybean Association had a meeting over in Ames, and they was talking about no-till. And I thought, but I went. And I listened. And there was a speaker from, I believe it was northern Indiana. And they had set up a plot that all the water that drained across an outlet. And then they could measure all the water that would run off the ground. And they farmed one. And when I say one, I think it was probably a 2 or 3 acre plot. It wasn't like it was a 40-acre field or something. But they farmed one no-till and one conventional till, plowed it, disked it, so on and so forth. You got to remember, it takes 5 years to get true no-till. It doesn't come immediately. The first year is not bad. The second and third year is pretty rough. The fourth year starts to get better. And the fifth year, you're back to where you started from, when you're not wasting all the fuel going over the ground. Okay? The fields were side by side. They had a heavy rain. They caught the water coming off. The water that came off of the till ground, there was so much that it flooded their equipment. The water that came off the no-till ground was barely enough to measure. That got my attention. If I can hold the water on the hill, maybe I can keep from losing so much crop in the bottom, in the low ground. So along in about 93. 93, by the way, was an extremely wet year. In fact, I think 93 was the year Des Moines lost their drinking water, if I remember right. We put out 2 or 3 fields of no-till and decided that, it's not any worse off than any of the rest of it. But I was well aware that we didn't get the benefit of no-till that first year. But anyway, and in 94, we put everything into no-till. Now, we had moved very, very slowly from using steel to control weeds to using herbicide to control weeds. We cultivated. Now, when I came back to the farm in 65, I never harvested corn in the ear of my own. I ran the picker on some of Dad's, but I never harvested corn of my own When I came back in '65, Dad bought a combine. We went to
Oh, okay.
combine mowing the field. That's a whole nother set of challenges that, whatever. Now I lost my train of thought, Jim.
You're talking about no-till and how we relied on steel.
Yes, we'd cultivated. When you go to no-till, you give up steel. So now you go from no herbicide to depending entirely on herbicide. There were the learning curve was extremely steep, I will say. The neighbors definitely looked down their nose at us. But we learned. And as you stay with no-till, the weed pressure definitely decreases. You don't bring new weed seed up. And as we were able to control our weeds with different herbicides like Roundup.
What a bad word.
What a bad word. But, what I found as we started to using herbicides solely for weed control, these were the words that came to me from the chemical dealer. Oh, Roy, don't you understand? You've got to have at least 1/4 of an inch of rain within a week, or this herbicide doesn't work. The next year, you change herbicides. So this is what you hear. Oh, Roy, don't you understand? If you get a rain within 2 or 3 days, this goes out of the root, the seed germination zone, and this herbicide won't work. So when I sprayed Roundup on that damn grass, it killed it. And it killed it every time I sprayed it on foxtail. I didn't need to worry about it. It didn't matter if it rained 1/4 of an inch. Didn't matter if it rained 5 inches. It killed that blasted grass. That was the best thing that ever happened to no-till. Okay. But as we were able to have cleaner fields, the weed pressure went way, way, way down. Now, water hemp it's still out there beating on us. And you really got to pay attention or it'll get ahead of you. Canada thistle went away. Sunflower pretty much went away. Cockleburs definitely went away. Butterprint will be there forever. But butterprint, velvet leaf, buttonweed, whatever you want to call it, it'll be there forever because it's got seeds in the ground that'll germinate after at least 50 years. We know that. But we can control them by rotating herbicides. It's all a learning process. How do you do it a little better every year? Can you inch it up a little every year? Can you be a little more efficient every year? That's where we work towards. And are we there? No, we're not there. Our dealer that we buy our fuel from, he says you use about half as much fuel as we do. Just about half. Well, we still got to combine it. So that fuel's all there. But when you go to the field in the spring, you go to the field to plant. I look out my window in the fall after I've come in from harvest, And I look out at the neighbors and I see this huge tractor pulling this massive tillage piece of equipment. You know, I'm going to get myself in trouble if I just keep talking. But the equipment companies keep providing farmers with a different tool to till the soil. This one is better. It really doesn't look like you tilled the soil. So you've got all the residue on the top yet. And it only cost you a 500 horsepower tractor to pull it.
You're bringing up some interesting thoughts, Roy.
Some of these tillage tools anymore, my goodness, I can't believe how long from front to back they are. They're massive. And if you put them in the ground, and I think that's what you bought it for, they take some horses to pull them across some of this ground. This year, I've heard people talking a little bit about how hard the ground was and how much power it took to pull their tillage tool and so on. Well, we pull a strip till in the fall over what we can. And I don't know, Tim was pulling it 5.5 mile an hour, 6 mile an hour. Yeah, I said, put a little harder this fall than some falls. They said, not bad. But it's no-till ground. If you hire somebody to put some tile in the ground, of course they don't dig it anymore, they knife it. And the land contractor that we have used, I says, I can tell the minute I pull onto your land. It doesn't take near as much to pull it across the field. Not near as much. We definitely, there are those who would say we're fanatical, and they would probably be right. But in the spring, after they've worked the ground, if we get a hammer and rain and a wind, and believe me, the wind does blow where I live. Yeah, wind does blow. You come down the road and you can hardly see till you drive on to the Bardole land. I had an uncle that hauled milk out of Lytton, Iowa all his life. And we'd go up and see Uncle Howard occasionally. He had run 2 routes. One route, I think he started about 4 in the morning, and the other one he ran start 7:30 or 8 in the morning. And it was up around Lytton. He talked about the Canoke Road and so on. If you lived up in that country, you'd know what he was talking about. He said there was a field right on a curve. It was a cornfield. And the guy had plowed it and pulled a harrow tool over it. And we got about a 3-day screamer. Wind just filled the ditches. Howard said, you see that field? If you walk out into that field right now, then the corn was up high. You can see where every plowshare cut the ground. So he lost absolute everything that he turned with a moldboard plow. That is devastating. This is going to step back on you. Dad said during the Depression they'd go to meetings at the It's NRCS office now, Conservation
Was it
Service, I
ASCS
believe
then?
is what it was. Yeah. They would be someone giving a talk, and they'd say, "How far to the Great Desert?" And somebody would stand up or offer, how far it was to a desert in the West, somebody to the desert in Africa, and so on. The answer, however, that was given, the distance to the Great Desert is 6 inches straight down. Now, when I was at Iowa State, Dr. Fredrickson was my soils professor. And he said, "Class, I want you to understand, you can never build soil. The very best you can hope for is to reduce the speed at which you lose it." Okay? If I went back to Doc Fredrickson today, I haven't seen him for a while. He's probably dead by now. You can, with no-till and great care, build soil. Extremely slowly, but you can build soil. But you can't build soil and pull a ripper across it, or a field cultivator, or a disc. Dr. Hatfield used to be the Soil Tilth Lab. It's changed names and he's retired. He said that absolutely the worst tool that a farmer was ever coerced into using is a disc. A disc will guarantee that you give up 1/4 of an inch of moisture. So if you're in a dry year, every time you disc it, you demand another 1/4 of an inch of rain that you probably aren't going to get. In a wet year, you do exactly what that plow on that heavy gumbo soil, you do exactly what that plow did, only faster, because you can pull a disc faster than you can pull a plow. Now, I've wandered just a little bit, maybe quite a bit, but that gives you some idea of where I'm coming from. The soil, my soil, our soil, is very, very special to me. That home farm, I've been over it enough times that I don't have to look to the end of the rows to see where I'm at. I can look down and I know the terrain well enough to know where I'm at. If I can get out and get my hands in that soil, Jim, there's nothing, absolutely nothing that will substitute for that for me.
But Roy, you brought it up that neighbors had talked about when you had those weeds. How can you be a steward of the soil and conservation when it's not popular? Or you're the one that stands out because you have weeds, or you're not out in the field like everybody else is?
I've been the black sheep long enough. It don't matter to me. It irritated me one time. We started, the implement dealer had some ground, and the shop people had farmed it. And I think he got tired of the shop people farming when they was supposed to be working. I don't actually know that. But anyway, he asked if we'd like to farm it. Of course we wanted to farm it. And we farm it no-till. And as it happens, this was one of those herbicide situations. And we had, I think it was actually, now I'm not sure which weed it was, but it was one we had a problem with. And about half the field, oh my, it come through bad. Well, a neighbor took a big cardboard and wrote on it, Bardole Experiment Farm, and nailed it up on the corner of our field.
I'm sure you didn't.
I didn't like that very much. But didn't change the way I farm. As you spoke of when you started, we go to church every Sunday. I've went to church every Sunday all my life. Same church. That church now is really struggling because they many folks left out of here to go to church. And when we go to church, there's way too many people with the Bardole name associated with them as a percent of the crowd. But I believe when the Bible says, do your work in 6 days and on the seventh day, rest. I believe in that. There's all kinds of things in the Bible that tell us how to live and how to respond to our neighbors. I try real hard, Jim. I don't always win, but I try. And sometimes you just got to turn a blind eye and shut your ears and do what you think.
Sometimes that other cheek of yours stings a little bit.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
You felt that.
I've seen that. Yes, I have.
Yes, well, what was the lesson that came from your dad, your grandfather, your mother that gave you that resilience so that you could say, I'm doing what I'm doing, and you can talk about me at church, you can talk to me at the coffee shop, but I'm still going to do what I'm doing because I think it's right.
I think that the thing that has built me up is the dad had 5 kids, 4 boys and a girl. Mary Ann's a girl. She was spoiled only a little since she was the last one.
I can attest to that.
They gave us all a feeling of self-worth and that you're okay. Life's a struggle. Things sometimes get twisted and bent, but you're okay. And as I've watched my brothers and sister, nobody's had grease skids. Nothing's been just peachy keen for everybody. Everybody has struggles. Everybody has struggles. But that was something that the folks, both mom and dad, praised us, told us we was okay. You get there, you'll be okay. That's terrible important. I don't care if you're farming or what you're doing.
But what's the difference between that self-worth, that you're a worthy person and do a good job, and what we experience a lot now, which is you can do no wrong, you're special, and you turn that into entitlement, which you don't have any entitlement about you.
The other side of that is there is a consequence. And when you screw up, there is a consequence, Roy. If you get in trouble at school and you come home, you'll wish you was back in school. Dad had a tongue that would cut you to ribbons. Never knew but what he loved you. But oh my goodness sakes, I'd 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 take a good sharp paddling before I'd take a ton lashing from Dad. Absolutely so.
Little Paul Bardole from Rippy Church would tongue lash you? I can't believe that.
Oh, yes. Yes. Dad was one of four. Dad was a twin. Dad had, Grandma Bardole had a set of twins that died at birth. Now, this is around the turn of the century or a little after, 1905 to 1915, 16. Dad's twin died at birth. When Dad was born, the nurse that was helping Grandma laid Dad's head in the palm of her hand, and his feet would not reach her elbow. He was a tiny, tiny baby.
Mm-hmm.
He shouldn't have lived at that point in time. The first set of twins that Grandma had after they were stillborn, Granddad said, "What do I do with them now?" And the doctor said, "Take them out and bury them." So Granddad wrapped them up in a blanket, took them out, and buried them under the apple tree. Now, outside of our shop, which is a building that the boys and I built several years ago, there is an apple tree. It's a wealthy apple tree. It's been there longer than I have. But that apple tree was very close to where the house was when Grandma and Grandpa Bardole were having children. So as far as we are concerned, the twins are buried under that apple tree. Fact, I don't know, but for us it is. Life was hard then, Jim.
You talk about a lesson that your grandfather taught your dad. How resilient do you have to be to have the expectation that you're going to have a new baby and you have two of them and they're dead? Now, we've had that with lambs. You've had it with cattle. We deal with it. But to go outside and then dig a hole for your children and then wake up the next morning and start the day like you needed to.
Go out, milk the cows, feed the cattle. Yeah. When, if you go to the cemetery, go to the old cemeteries. Oh, there's a lot of very short time spans in children. And I've heard it said that life on the prairie was bone weary labor, punctuated with extreme sorrow. That would be that period of time.
Well, I know from my genealogy that I've got some of those headstones, and some of those questions are, okay, what happened to baby Baker number 1 and baby Baker number 2? Because there's no headstone anywhere.
That's what happened. Now, there's 2 or 3 things that have punctuated my experience. I had a neighbor by the name of Robert Holtz. Right after Phyllis and I were married, he had sold a load of fat cattle, and they came up to turn the corner just north of where I used to live, and the driver cut the corner short and dumped a load of fats in the ditch on the corner. And Robert, of course, he'd come up from, they'd just finished loading cattle, and they had to unload them. It's the only way to deal with them is to unload them and round them up, Then they had to take them to a separate yard where you could take care of them, and some of them anyway. But Robert was a neighbor. He was a neighbor that would always talk to me. He was a neighbor that would listen when I did say something, which is nice. Didn't ridicule me, accepted me for what I was. He showed up at my doorstep one day and he says, I just got back from an Iowa Soybean Association annual meeting, and the director from this district is going to have to retire. Would you do that, Roy? I said, oh. What does it amount to? Oh, they have 2 meetings a year. I said, I think I can do that. Asked Phyllis. Yeah, she said that she had let me go. Well, 30 years later, and way the gosh more than 2 meetings a year, I retired. I served 9 years with the Iowa Soybean Association. I served 9 years on the American Soybean Association. I served 9 years on the United Soybean Board. And I served 2 years as chairman of the United States Soybean Export Council. Now, if that doesn't show a thick head, I don't know how you're going to.
Well, you got hoodwinked.
Yeah, but I could have said no anywhere along the line.
Thank you, neighbor Bob.
Yes. He passed away recently, and I hated to see him go. One of the times, this is extraneous. One of the times that one winter when I was doing a fair amount of travel, we had terrible, it was a hard winter. Terrible hard winter. Phyllis would take me down to the airport, leave me off, turn around, and drive home. Only 2 times did she not come and pick me up. Both those times it was an ice storm. And she got as far as the edge of Des Moines and said, I'm here. If you want to come home or be with me, you come to me.
Yes, dear.
I did. Yes, dear. This particular time, the wind was blowing and there was a lot of snow on the ground and it was cold. I got on the airplane and the runway that we took was the runway that runs from southeast to northwest in Des Moines. And it was a ground blizzard when we come down. And I was thinking about Phyllis, and I happened to be on the right side of the airplane. And as we took off, went through the level of the ground blizzard, and I looked out to the north, and here was this absolute white deck of snow. And all of a sudden, as the plane continued to bank to the west, here were the tops of trees sticking up out of that ground blizzard. And as I glanced further, you could see the trees. It wasn't ground blizzard over there. You know what I was looking at? I was looking at the Wisconsin Advance. No, I was looking at the Wisconsin Glacier. The last glacier that came stopped at Des Moines. And when you get to the west edge of that, you have the Luss Hills and so on. But you don't have this nice, flat, very gentle rolling prairie pothole region. You have there are steeper hills and they break up the ground so you don't get that wind blowing the snow. Now, I would guess that I was the only individual on that airplane, and probably the next one and the next one, that looked out to the north that saw what I saw. But I learned to love soils in high school. Doc Fredrickson very definitely improved that, advanced that. And as I have been around the soils and worked with the soils and cared for the soils, oh my, I love soils. I truly do. As far as I am concerned, if you take care of the soil, you don't have to worry about the water. Now, we catch all kinds of baloney from Des Moines. The Raccoon River is where they pump their water. So anything I do in the Raccoon River watershed, it affects them. It does. And we've come off of 4 years of drought. And if you'd asked me 4 years ago, and you'd have said, now, we're going to have 4 years and you're going to struggle to get enough water. And then the fifth year, you're going to have adequate rain. Can you tell me what kind of effect this is going to have? I would have said Des Moines is going to scream bloody murder about nitrates in the Raccoon River. Guess what? They did. They did. These are leaky soils. Water and anything that's in them goes through the soils. We've created this wonderful tile network that short circuits the water. The water as it goes down. Normally, water goes down where an eye lives and comes up under the river bed and becomes part of the river flow. When you put tile in the ground, you short circuit that so it goes directly from you into the tile and into the river. Guess what? It's carrying nitrates and anything else. Now, since I'm saying that I get better percolation of water into my soils than you do when you till them, am I making it worse? Probably. However, we've been growing a bushel of corn on about between 0.7 and 0.8 pounds of nitrogen.
That's blasphemy, Roy.
I know it is. We have grown. This last year was not quite as good, but this past year was awful. We were extremely wet. We were extremely dry. Through here, we had southern leaf blight, and if we've never dealt with it before, we don't select herbicides that are tolerant to it. So if by chance you have a herbicide that was tolerant to southern leaf blight, you won. But this year was difficult.
So we're going to go off a little different direction. So you said you had a tough year. I had a tough year. I mean, we're 100% no-till, but we still couldn't handle 11 inches of rain in 4 days. So I've got some really bad yields. Where in the hell, sorry to cuss, is the USDA coming up? We got a record crop because we're 700 miles apart, or 500, whatever the number is.
Everybody in between must have perfect crop, Jim. I think when it's all said and done and they add it up, sometime they're going to add it up and they're going to say, where the heck did all those bushels of corn go? We're short of bushels. And it probably won't happen this year.
Yeah, it'll probably happen in 27.
Yeah, that's when it'll show up. I will tell you, around here, At the places that I see, there's not corn piled out.
And we didn't put that much on-farm storage on.
No. No.
Well, there's a reason I like you, Roy. You agree on a lot.
Well, just because you agree with me don't mean I'm right.
No, but it makes you feel better that somebody else agrees with me.
Well, yeah. I understand that.
They call that confirmation bias, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I called it hoodwinked. I was joking when you were asked to get on the Iowa Soybean Association board. And you could have said no, obviously, but you had almost 30 years of commitment to the soybean industry.
I did.
Why?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. One of them was Dad. Dad was president of the school board and on the school board for years. He was president of the hospital board and was president of the hospital board for, I think, 3 major building projects. The boys and I would, somebody would come up along the road and stop. We would be hoeing in the garden, and Dad would walk over and talk to him, and we knew it was going to be at least an hour, if not 2, with hospital board business. He dealt with some real issues, difficult issues. He passed a bond issue to build onto our school. He said, Roy, if this doesn't pass, we won't have a school in 2 or 3 years. He could see the population.
So what year was this, Roy, just for reference?
50, 61, 60, 58.
Okay, so this is right on the cusp of all the consolidation. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
And one would say in Iowa, the first wave of consolidation, we're in the second wave now, aren't we? Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yes. They passed it.
Mm-hmm.
And they built a education wing, and they built a classroom and farm shop for the Voc Egg program. And they built a gym with for the time, a very good stage for stage productions. I graduated in 61. The last class to graduate from Rippey was 62. Okay. So we consolidated with Grand Junction. But there was still school at Rippey. They played their basketball games at Rippey. They played their baseball games at Rippey. They built a football field because Rippey didn't have football. And within the last 10 years, I suppose it's been that long. Time flies. Grand Junction School closed, and we went to Greene County School System. If they hadn't have built that school, it would have been not good. The hospital, Greene County Medical Center, was the first hospital in the country that built a doctor's clinic attached to the hospital. So if doctors had an emergency or needed to see patients in the hospital, they didn't get in the car. They walked down the hall to the hospital. Dad was a visionary in many, many ways. He truly was. Uh, big footsteps to follow. His footsteps in the church. Grandma, my grandma Bardole, she was a school teacher. This Tom Grow that I spoke of had a bet with Nate that he couldn't date that schoolmarm. So Nate dated her and eventually married her. Grandma Bardole believed in education. You heard me say that Dad just didn't quite get the 4 years in at the 4 C's. That was a long time ago, to have all 4 of your kids attend higher education of some kind. All 4 of them. Grandma was, when they lived in the garden, the church they attended was half a mile west and a quarter mile north. It was a friend's church. When that closed, then they got a Model T. They went to town. Okay. One Christmas program, Grandma had taught, had always had a Sunday school class that she taught. And the church was heated by a furnace with a center. The furnace was in the center of the church with a big grate. Okay. The chimney was over there, clear across the basement. So you had a horizontal stovepipe to the chimney. Well, if you've ever been around that kind of a heating, you know that sooner or later your chimney's going to catch on fire. That's the way my house was, the first house I lived in. And one, they'd had not a bad fall, and they hadn't fired the furnace hard, and they come up to this Christmas program, and it was cold, terrible cold. And they fired the furnace hard. And guess what? The chimney caught on fire. Well, when the chimney catches on fire, I can tell you what it sounds like. If you stood by a steam engine as it was starting to leave the station, that's what it sounds like. Only it's for us, it was in the living room.
Boy.
And it just goes, whoo, 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 whoo. And the bricks on the chimney get hot.
Oh, boy.
Really hot. I have heard people say that they had the wallpaper catch on fire and come down on them in the house. Anyway, the chimney caught on fire in the church during the Christmas program. Granddad Nate grabbed his coat, went outside, stood outside in the bitter cold, and watched the roof of the church, so that if the roof caught on fire, he could get everybody out.
Oh, my.
Yeah. Church is important to this family.
Well, one of the stories that you told, or Mary, that I remember, or maybe it's Mary, of you going on vacation out west, and it was Sunday, and your dad drove you around in the station wagon to find a church to go to.
Always. We always went to church on vacation. Did we really like walking into a Sunday school class where we knew no one? Not so much. But it taught us how important it was to the folks that you worship on Sunday.
So, I was kind of hoping that would get here. All right. So Rippey United Methodist. What was the evolution of that? Was that EUB or is it Methodist?
Yes. No, it was an EUB.
So in the 60s, you had a consolidation between EUB and the Methodist to form United Methodist.
Yes.
Was that a challenge for your church at that time?
I don't think so.
Okay.
It's kind of strange, but I really don't think so.
Okay. So not long before we moved to Perry, the United Methodist Church made some statements and position announcements about sexuality, and Rippey lost members. You were a lay leader at that time.
Yeah.
How were you able to balance your faith, following the teachings of Christ, with the realities of what was a political change in the church?
I didn't struggle with that, Jim. Jesus taught, love your neighbor. Judge not, so you don't have to be judged. We read the 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians, and it ends up with, of these, faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these, Jim, is love. And it's the love that Christ tried to teach us. Now, we try and sort it out and separate it and compartmentalize, and it's not that hard, Jim. When the Pharisees tried to trap Jesus, and Jesus told them the story of the Good Samaritan. Now, who is it that's a neighbor here? Well, it was the Samaritan. Well, the Samaritans were hated by the Jews. Over and over again, as Jesus taught, we hear him say, go forth and do likewise. And every time it boiled down to love your neighbor. Love your neighbor as I have loved you. And Jesus has told us over and over, Jim, I'll forgive you. All you got to do is ask. No greater love. And then he could have walked away from the cross, Jim. He didn't have to. He could have walked away. But he hung there for us, so that what greater love hath man than that he giveth for another, over and over. To me, that all this homosexuality thing, and we've had another round of it in the Methodist Church, big time. To me, it's just not that hard, Jim. Jesus told us how to deal with it. The scribes and Pharisees tried to nail him down on all of the rules and the laws and so on that we saw in the Old Testament. Jesus said, they don't count. I'm here now. I'm here to show you what love truly means. And I expect you to follow that.
So you hit on something that I've struggled with, and I don't share this often, is exactly what you talked about when Jesus said, I'm here with the new covenant and the old laws are gone. But what do we talk about? We bring up what happened in Leviticus and what happened in here. And I'm like, hold on a second here. Did Jesus tell us to forget about that stuff?
Yep. I am the new. I am the new way. No one goes to the Father except by me. Jim, it's not that difficult. And I know that everybody tries to dissect it and cut it up and on and on and on. It's not that hard. You may not like what Jesus is telling you, but it's not that hard.
Mm-hmm. And you know what you just said that Jesus said that Jesus didn't say is here's the formula. You do A plus B plus C, and you multiply by D, and you get to Kevin. Why do we make it so difficult, Roy?
I believe, and this is where I walk on ice that's so thin I'm stupid to go here. It is power. What happened in the day of Christ? It was the scribes and Pharisees that gave Christ so much grief. Why? Because they thought Christ was going to take the power of the church away from them. Things haven't changed, Jim. I'm sorry.
It's been 2,100
Things
years.
haven't changed. They haven't changed. How did I went to spit out the guy's name and now I can't. The guy that took all of the
Jim
people
Jones
down to Mexico and yeah, Jim Jones made him drink poison punch. What was that all about? Power. I want power over them. This is my flock, and I have control over them. No. That's Jesus' flock. It's not Jim Jones. I don't care who your pastor is. It's not him. It's not the president of the board. You're either Christ's flock or you aren't.
Well, this is the second podcast in this week where we had some tough discussions about religion. And both of them weren't expected. But I think it gets back to something.
Yeah.
In my college girlfriend's parents' kitchen was one of those tapestries that hung, and your mom had one, my grandmother had one, it had sayings on it. And it's a verse where it talks about pretty much the farmer has the ultimate faith to put a seed in the ground. And I don't know how you can be a farmer. And I don't care if you're growing crops, I don't care if you're growing cotton or livestock, that you can't have faith to do your job.
We've kind of moved on, I'll say, with science. Till farmers believe that I have control over it. I buy the seed, and it's the seed that has the latest technology, and I know how much fertilizer. I may add that a little bit to that, and I know how to do it. I can grow this on my ground. I don't need God because I know how to do it. Sorry. When I talk about the home farm, come real close to crying. It's that important to me. That's not my ground.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. I've been given the responsibility to care for it. I've passed that concept on to my boys that I farm with, my grandson. This isn't yours. You only have it for a short time, and you're supposed to take care of it. Period. That's the way I believe, Jim. There's nothing that galls me any worse than the man that sees somebody step foot onto my land, and he goes out and rips him a new one because they're standing on his land. It's not his land. As long as that man isn't doing damage, he's so far out of line I can't even see him. That's my opinion. Do I want to see somebody tearing around my field when I'm no-till and I don't know how I'm going to get the ruts out of my field that their pickup's putting in it? No, I don't like that. But that's not someone being on my soil. That's someone trespassing in a way that destroys what is important to me. They don't have a right to do that. Jake Peters, he was a teacher here. He was a big old German. He came from up north here in Iowa a little ways. His folks never spoke anything but, well, they did, but they spoke German at home always. And he was a big German. And one of the things that he tried to instill on his students was, your freedom ends where my nose begins. Think about that one a little bit. Your freedom ends where my nose begins. When he'd get two boys that would get in a fight, he was big enough he could take them like this and hold them. And he would explain to them they were in the wrong, both of them. Jake taught a junior high Sunday school class in the back of the old church. And Jerry Groves, this was the same class that my older brother was in. Jerry Groves was in the class. He was honoring his sin. John Bardole, my cousin, was in the class, and he was right up there with Jerry. And they'd been sitting in class there and not listening to Jake and making it so other people's had a hard time listening. Jake was standing in between the pews in front of the pew they were standing in. And he just got enough. And he reached across, grabbed both of them by the gruff of the neck, picked them up, straightened them out, set them back down.
Oh, boy.
Now, you couldn't do that today. No. Those boys needed to hear it. And I would suggest that the boys that today need to hear it just as bad as John and Jerry did.
The teacher's nose might have been a little bit longer that day than it usually was, but they had invaded his freedom.
Yeah.
So how does it make you feel as a father when you see your sons grab on and be leaders like you did? You know, Tim's done the soybean board, and Pete's on the county commissioner council, farm bureau. Okay.
Supervisors, farm bureau. There's two statements associated with that. Obviously, by the time I was chairman of USEC, I was gone a lot. It wasn't a half-time job, but boy, it was way too close of it. And I left the boys to do the work. And somebody on one of the soybean boards says, "How about that, Roy?" Oh, I said, payback is hell. But having said that, the boys obviously have something to offer. You must use the gifts that you were given. Tim has proven to be extremely valuable in the soybean world. Peter he had supervisors Monday morning. Yesterday he had a meeting at 11:30 and another one at 4. Tomorrow he's got a morning meeting and something else. They're involved. What more can I say? You need to be involved in your community. I look at some of the run and gun folks around. They're not involved in the community. They're takers. They don't give back.
Well, that's a subject for an entire episode on its own. Because newsflash, we have them in Allen County, Indiana, too.
Yep. Absolutely takers.
And it makes it tough when you're trying to do the right thing. One of the hardest things for me to see was a farm that I'd farmed for 12 years, no-till, cover crop, chicken litter, and get it hit with a ripper.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh my. Yeah. I, Jim, that with no-till, you don't eliminate runoff. You don't eliminate some rills. And they're always a challenge to deal with. We have 160. Boy, there's 2 or 3 places we get this little rill, and you got to cross it every time you go across a field. And they're hard to deal with. You don't move the soil. Or if you happen to do some tiling, that's worse yet. Well, here, it's been several years ago now. We was doing some custom work for a fella down towards Perry. And we'd had a rain, and I went straight south of Ripien across to where the field was. And looked out across this field, ironed out. I mean, it was worked to it was garden. Only thing was, after that rain that we had, you could see the rills coming off the hills and then down to the draw and where it dumped into the ditch. And obviously there was enough water dumping into the ditch that it allowed silt to fill in. But on the back end of it, you could still see the gutter cut. You know, and I know, that when the next fall or spring came, that ground would be worked, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. It'd be just as flat and just as worked, but what did they lose? Remember, you only got 6 inches and you found the Great Desert.
If you think back to our faith and some of the things that we learn at church, is we're squandering some of the gifts that we're given.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Breadbasket of the world is what I was taught clear back in grade school. We live in the breadbasket of the world.
So the other lesson there that you've been an illustration of with your boys is don't squander the gifts that God gave you for being a leader and teaching others and live by example. That's a hard lesson when you want to pick up another quarter section or a half section to farm, and you can't because you're not the hot shot and you don't got the big fancy equipment. So it goes to your neighbors that farm 5, 6, 7, 10,000 acres. I mean, that's frustrating, but you're doing it right and living by example.
We have an internal conflict conversation, however you want to put it. We need to pick up more acres. We need to pick up, and that's a true statement. There isn't a farmer out here but what needs to pick up a few more acres. So, how do you pick up a few more acres? Well, you've got to be first done with harvest, so people look at you and they know you can get the work done. Or you've got to be first done with the planter so that you get all the crop in the ground early. Those are all visual on the outside. Is that really what is important here? That is an ongoing discussion among Peter, Tim, and Skylar. I try and keep my mouth shut. As obvious to this last hour and a half, I don't do good. But the statement, I mean, that's a real difficult thing. We run 12-row corn head. We had some hail this spring, and the hail adjuster he looked around. He says, "You run just one combine?" "Yeah." "Oh, well, and he's from he's from off this way, off southeast. Uh, how do you hire labor? Can you hand me that one?" Anybody that is willing or capable, or you would trust to, in the retired vein for harvest, is fully employed. I mean, there's lots of places for every farmer's looking for somebody to work during harvest. I'm 82. I work every day, or I think I do anyway. During harvest, I can't work 10, 12-hour days every day. I physically cannot. We found somebody that will, he's got another job. He'll come and run the auger cart so I can go to the house. There were still half a dozen days this fall that I got on the auger cart at 8 something in the morning, and I got off of it at 7:30 in the evening. We don't stop for dinner. We take our lunch with us. So pretty much I was on the tractor.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do that, Jim. My body says, "You dummy."
And you come home and you complain that you're sore, and Phyllis goes, "I told you."
I'm exhausted. I can barely eat supper and go to bed.
Oh, wow.
But the truth is, I like it. I like what I'm doing.
I think that's a testament to a good life if you're still enjoying what you're doing.
when I was a kid, I'm talking about 4, 5, 6 years old. There's 2 or 3 memories the folks spoke of. Dad got the M new, and I was not very old. Well, the M is older than I am, so I got it. The M was bought in 40. I was born in 43, but that M sat in the driveway, and I'd get out of the house, and they couldn't find me. There I'd be down there standing in the driveway looking at
that big M.
The other story is they come out of the house or Mom looked out the kitchen window, and there I was halfway up the windmill. That was about 3 or 4. And Dad come out and says, "Roy, why don't you come on down?" Okay. Well, my legs were too short to reach the next step, so I'd hang from the top step by my hands and drop to the next step down. Dad took the bottom steps off the leg of the windmill.
I have a solution to keep Troy off the windmill. Well, Roy,
oh dear.
The nice thing about you being at 82 is you're full of stories and experiences. But what we've been able to glean from our conversation is your commitment to stewardship, how resilience kept you on the farm, kept your dad on the farm, and the example that you gave to be leadership that you expressed through what your boys are doing, and the example that you've for the community and the church around you. So I appreciate you for what you've done in my life, though it's small compared to other people.
I didn't say anything about the 80s and 90s. They were very, very hard on this.
Well, I think that's a topic for another discussion, because I would love to talk with you about your dad talking about the Depression in the 80s and the similarities, because there were a lot and a lot more than I think we're willing to talk about. And the other thing that we don't talk about that I've thought about as I've talked about the 80s, and keep this in mind for when we can talk again, is a manipulation that made the 80s worse on certain of the farming population that didn't deserve it.
And we live with that. Dad lived with the first depression all his life. The same thing is true with what happened in the 80s. We live with the rest of the time. Absolutely.
So one of my bias is the GI Bill was the second hammer to fall on agriculture because it pushed people off the farm, because it made it so much easier to get off the farm.
Yeah.
The next one was the farm crisis. And the thing that happened with the farm crisis that we don't talk about is when I went to college in 1989, there weren't a lot of me because Dad said, get your butt off the farm, get a better job. So they went to engineering, accounting, whatever, teaching. So they didn't go to the School of Ag. So what between the Depression, the GI Bill, and the impacts of the youth that were affected by the 80s did that do to be a brain drain on agriculture?
If you can't go to school, you can stay home and farm.
Yeah. And my mom said that. She said, well, you're too stupid to go to school. You can stay home and farm. Not to me, but in general.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're stupid, you can stay home and farm. Worst thing could possibly ever happen. But it did over and over. Now, a lot of those folks that weren't genius, I'll just put it that way, they did lose it because they didn't pay attention to what they were doing financially. Yeah, you can do the work. Anybody can do the work. You can drive a tractor and so on. But you better pay attention to what you're doing. I know a fellow around here that same age as I am. And when he graduated from high school, he says, I'm not going to college. I'm going to farm. And I'm going to buy every piece of land I can get my hands on. And he did. He bought land in the mid to late 60s and early 70s. What a perfect time to buy land. It made him look like a genius. No. You look, I can show you neighbors that went down in the 90s. Circumstance. There was almost a generation lost in the 80s and 90s. Not quite. I happened to be there, but pretty close to a generation lost.
Well, your two sons of the anomaly, they should have gone off and got a real job.
Yeah. Yep. But they both have a 4 years education.
Like you said, they're the anomaly. I mean, 4 years in ag.
Yeah. Jason he's an engineer. He did go off and get a job. And he wanted to come back to the farm, but there just wasn't income for it. God, you got to have income. That's what we're struggling with now as I retire. How do we truly provide an income for somebody else?
Tough, $4 corn. And what's your average cash rent? $275, $300?
Not anymore. It dropped off after last year. It got up towards 400 for some of them. Yeah, that was.
No, you
can't do that.
Well, I'm afraid that we're on the edge of some things happening in our industry.
Oh, I know we are.
You've got the silver migration that's happening. I happened to look on Schrader's auction website a few weeks ago. They had 16 equipment auctions scheduled for into November, December, first part of January. And I know one of those is a bankruptcy. There could have been some others, but a lot of them were retirements.
Tim was told that 30% of people under the age of something or other will not get funding for another year.
Yeah, wouldn't surprise me.
Yep.
Well, on that depressing note, I
Yeah,
have loved our conversation. This is exactly what I expected. I usually make a script, and this time I said, nope, I'm going to start with this sentence and we're just going to see where it takes us. And it took us to places I didn't expect and that I did expect.
I have found that as I have been interviewed over the years, interviewers usually come with a series of questions. They usually get the first one out. Then, when they're about out of time, they get the second one out, and the rest of them go.
Well, I use AI, Chat GPT, and when I was preparing for this, I would give it some prompts on here's the things I want to talk about with Roy, here's how I want to start it, and here's how I kind of want it to flow. And the answer that ChatGPT gave me, don't fall victim to saying this to lead Roy where you want it to go. So, well, Roy, thank you for your time today. I miss my times in Rippy Perry, but you taught me lessons that stick with me, and your lessons of stewardship stick with me as I'm driving on our farm here, and as I continue to no-till and try and buck the system, which is really tough when you got a lot of Amish with rototillers.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, yes.
I look forward to our next conversation. Maybe we can have you and Pete and Tim, and we can talk about the farm crisis and how your family dealt with it.
Yeah, that'd be a challenge.
Well, thank you, Roy. And to my followers, this is just another conversation about some of these ag roots and how those ag roots formed them and how we use the resilience that we learned from ag to make us better people. Well, thank you for the likes, the follows, and I look forward to more episodes like this.
Take care, Jim.